Thank you. Thank you, Linda. And welcome to everyone here. Tonight we're going to do something slightly different. It's a little bit, I guess you might say, esoteric, but I have a combined interest, of course, in astrology and also in history. And so tonight we're going to look at some U.S. presidents, some considered successful by historians, some not. And my theory, the theory that I was testing was, does a president have to be in his, or maybe someday her, North Node in order to be a successful president? Because as a karmic astrologer, as you know, I look at the North Node and the South Node. South Node first. Where are you coming from, right? What is the energy that you are bringing in? And I said this in our first meeting. Charts are the records of what I call the fingerprints of time. So in the chart is a karmic memory. In the chart is a recording of the energy that you're working out in this lifetime. This is stuff that you've gotten in previous lifetimes. It could be a positive energy. It could be a shadow energy, but it's all in your chart. And it's up to the evolutionary astrologer to open that chart, to figure it out. So when I do a chart, when I do a reading, I say I'm weaving the story of past and present. You know, I'm looking at this map. I'm telling the karmic story. And the way I work with my clients is that I find the root causes of these blockages. And my goal is to get people from being stuck in their South Node to move towards the North Node. Now, there is nothing inherently bad with the South Node, right? We all have them. And there's nothing inherently bad in how you lived previous lives. The trick is that we come here to do what? To learn, right? You don't want to go back to the first grade, right? You don't want to, how would you like it if you were in school and every year you went back and every year you went back to kindergarten, you went back to the first grade? It would be maddening. You wouldn't grow. So if we're doing growth as a reason to be here, then the idea is that we need to move forward. So you want to get out of the South Node, use some of the talents of your South Node, perhaps, that you've honed, but don't get stuck. Move forward, move into your North Node. So again, a primer, if there's anyone there who's not as familiar with North and South, the North and South nodes are on the ecliptic. They are the nodes of the moon. And as you can read here, the ascending or North Node is where the moon crosses from the south of the ecliptic and vice versa. The location of these nodes at the time of birth indicates your karmic blueprint, your soul path, right? So where you're coming from, south, where you're going towards north. And of course, the South Node is depicted as sort of the little cup. And the way I remembered it when I was learning this, because I could never figure it out, is this holds the energy. It holds the information from your past life. So that's a trick to try to remember if you're trying to memorize this stuff. That holds the energy. And then, of course, the North Node, where you're going towards, you dump it out. You're getting rid of that old and you're refilling it with new knowledge as you move forward. Okay, so if we need to move into our North Node, right, if this is the premise, basically, of evolutionary astrology, that you need to move into this North Node in order to experience the most out of this lifetime, right? What does it mean for a president, the presidency, and the country if this person is not fulfilling their North Node? Can you be successful? Because first of all, the success is a relative term, right? You don't have to be president to be successful. Are you a decent person? But the whole idea, if you reach pinnacles of power, does that necessarily mean that you are leading a successful life? And I would argue not necessarily. And that's sort of the premise that I was looking at. And I think that I have studied enough. I didn't have enough, obviously, tonight to do every single president. That would take several hours. But I've studied this enough to kind of think that even if you hit a pinnacle of success, if you're not following your North Node, it's not going to be fulfilling. There could be problems. It could be a disastrous presidency kind of thing. So that's what we're going to look at. So what does it mean? And the reason I got started on this is because, the 2016 election, everybody was talking, it was the election. And of course, I looked at the charts and I realized that neither Trump nor Hillary Clinton were following their North Node. These are two people deeply ensconced, like stuck in their South Node. I'm going to do what I did. I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to grow. I'm going to keep butting my head against the wall and trying to live a new incarnation exactly as I lived my old one. And I know from experience of doing, if you will, regular people charts, that this is often a recipe for an unfulfilled life. It's a recipe for illness. It's a recipe, sometimes I've even seen, for early death. It's a recipe for sadness because you're like fitting the square peg, into the round hole because you're trying to live the way you lived in the past, and it's not working again. So what does it mean that neither one of these people were in their North Nodes? So that is what started me on thinking this. So if you look at Trump's chart, and I could do an hour on this chart, alone, and it is kind of a stereotypical chart of the person. And I'm trying not to be political here, but I'm just think personalities. All right. So you've got a Leo rising. Okay. So if you know anything about astrology, the rising sign is your personality, it's your persona. So if you have a Leo rising, Leo ruled by the sun, Leo, the king of the jungle, this is someone who likes prominence, who likes people to revolve around them, right? Leo is the king of the jungle. It's ruled by the sun, which is the center of the universe, and everything revolves around it. So Leos are not shy, retiring creatures. It's a rare Leo rising, unless it's heavily afflicted, unless you've got Saturn there, unless you've got a lot of retrograded planets. But it's a rare Leo rising that wants to, sit in the corner and read a book. They want to be seen. He's got Mars in Leo on the cusp of that first house. Now, I'm giving you more than the nodes here, but this is, just kind of as an idea of what we're looking at here. Mars, okay, the god of war in the fire sign Leo on the cusp of the first house, right? I'm a fighter. I'm bellicose. So this is kind of the person we're seeing. If you look in his second house, pardon me, he's got retrograded Neptune. Second house is the house of value and self-worth. Often if somebody has a heavy second house, a lot of stuff in there, retrogrades in there, there's issues of value, self-worth, money. Take a look at Jacqueline Kennedy's second house. You can look up these charts online. She had a retrograded Saturn there. So she was always looking for daddy, right? Saturn, always looking for money. There was never enough. There was always somebody who needed to provide for her. So second house will tell you a lot about how I value myself and my self-worth. Well, he's got Neptune there, retrograded. Of course, Neptune is the illusion, the confusion, the obfuscator. So, his self-worth may be a little bit trumped up, not to make a pun, but a little bit less clear to him than it is to other people. He's got it in his mind that this is his value. And then, of course, he's got Juno, he's got Chiron, the wound issue, and he's got Jupiter that is just stationed direct. So he's got a lot of second house. But let's get to the node. So he's got a south node down in the fourth house in Sagittarius. Now, Sag is the seeker, the journeyer, the one who wanders, the one who wants to gain information. But what are the two words that you think of when you think of Sagittarius, right? I know, right? The shadow of Sagittarius is you don't have to tell me anything on the planet because I got it. I know. And look at your Sag friends. Look at your Sag South Node friends. Look at your Sag Rising friends. I know. I got it. Don't tell me anything. I got this. I've spent lifetimes after lifetimes studying and taking this information in. Please, there's nothing you can tell me. He's got his moon right next to that South Node. So he's emotionally invested in his knowledge, okay? And it's in the 4th house. Anybody wonders why he surrounds himself with his family? His South Node is in the 4th house, right? The house of family. And it's also, the 4th house is my people, right? So I know what I need to know to take care of my people, right? And you heard this in the campaign. I know more than the generals. I alone can fix this. I know. It's me. So you can argue very successfully that this is someone who's deeply in his South Node, right? I got it. His Gemini North Node in 10, if you look up at the 10th house, well, Gemini, the lesson of someone going from Sag to Gemini is to stop saying, I know, and to start saying, hey, what can you teach me, right? Because what is Gemini? Gemini is the communicator, right? Gemini wants to grab information. And Gemini wants to say, hey, I can learn from you. Can you share that tidbit? I want to exchange information. Gemini's not content to say, I know. Gemini wants to say, give me more knowledge. So the tragedy, if you will, is that this is someone who could be, and I know people are laughing when I say this, a philosopher king, right? The 10th house is government, it's authority, it's the world around us. So the 10th house is a very governmental, paternal, authoritarian house. His sun is there. He's got Uranus on the other side, which is quick intellect. So this is someone who could have stepped into the presidency and said, let me hear from everybody, right? Let me learn. Let me take this in. I'm going to project myself, sun, as a unique individual. There's been nobody like me in the presidency. But I'm, here, let me hear from you. Come here. My Gemini is insatiable. I want more information. His Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is in the 11th house, the house of people who come together for like-minded causes. He could have had, been really the philosopher king or the learning or, being what I think a lot of people hoped, that he would calm down once he got there and then, change his ways. But you remember, his Sag is ruled by Jupiter. That goes back to that 2nd house. I know what I know, and if I give that up, where am I? What's my value? What's my self-worth? So this is someone still deeply ingrained in that Sag South Node. I don't see any movement out of it. I don't think anybody else does. Where this leads for all of us, who knows? But that was his chart. Now, if you look, and I just capsulized some of what I said here. The Gemini 10th house, the code words for Sag is I know. This is someone who says, I got it. Don't tell me anything. And again, this is listen to me, open up. This is pretty much what I said, but I'm putting it here in case people want it written down. Now, then I looked at Hillary's chart. And Hillary and I share the same birthday. She's older than me, but same date, certainly not the same year. But I looked and I said, so she's the Scorpio South Node generation. Keep in mind, and I'm going to reference this, Al Gore also is a Scorpio South Node kid. So think about that for a minute. So Hillary is a Scorpio South Node in her 1st house. So look over the 1st house. She's got Jupiter, which is, how she moves forward, how she grows, and her Jupiter has just tipped into Sag, but that's first house. The Scorpio South Node, their karmic addiction, their memory from previous lives is to be wrapped up in the drama. Scorpio wants nothing more than fight and passion and drama, and I got to be in the center of things. If you go back to, I think I did my second Zoom class was on a walk through the nodes, and I talked about these people, some of my friends and clients who have this Scorpio South Node who cannot give up the fight. They're interfering with their family and their kids and because they cannot step back and relax, because Scorpio loves mystery. Scorpio loves the death, fight to the death, right? It's the king of the underworld. So with her Scorpio South Node, Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio, in the 9th house, wedged between two warriors, right? She's got 9th house, first of all, is the house of international affairs, the world, higher education, all these great big issues. She's got Saturn. She's got Saturn on one side, the authoritarian. She's got Mars, the warrior. Mars and Saturn, when they're together, often indicate, huge battles, huge fight, and it's in fiery Leo. So she's programmed to seek out like a little, heat-seeking missile, drama, and the center of things that have big issues. I mean, this is what she thrives on. But that's her South Node, guys. That's where she's coming from. So what's the opposite sign of Scorp? Well, it's Taurus, right? So her Taurus, go right across the chart. Her North Node is Taurus 7. So the first house is my personality, who I am. So she is the lightning rod, right? She is the one that says, I'm the fighter. I'm here. Remember way back when Bill was running, she made what was then a controversial statement of, I'm not going to sit around and make cookies and tea when I'm first lady, and that was, big controversy. She just is a lightning rod for that kind of Scorpio drive. Well, Taurus wants anything but drama, right? So think of Taurus. What is Taurus? Taurus is the bull, right? Taurus is the epicure of the zodiac. Taurus wants to sit in the pasture and eat good food and see the pretty butterflies. And where Scorpio is all about life and death, metaphysical battles, there is, I would argue, no more earthy, grounded sign than Taurus the bull. I am going to enjoy the heck out of being in the physical. I'm going to eat a cupcake and just suck down every morsel, right? I'm going to just go sit and watch the ocean and the waves come in, and that's how I'm going to spend my day. I'm the peaceful bull, seeking this pasture, and I love the physical. I don't want to care for battles and fights and icky stuff. I want to enjoy the physical. I'm of the earth. I'm grounded. And her South Node being in 1 means I'm the center of attention. I'm the lightning rod. Where your North Node being in 7 is, I'm just going to sit and have a great dinner with all my friends. And I'm going to, just sit here on a nice summer night and drink wine with my friends and enjoy this physical existence. Now, I'm sort of dumbing down Taurus, but you see the difference. I'm finding peace in what I am and who I am, and here in the physical. I'm letting the battle go. Now, Taurus is ruled by Venus, and here's the tricky part for her. Her Venus is in the 12th house, the house of secrets and secret enemies. So people were saying to me, oh, should Hillary run? Should Hillary run? And I said, you know what? No, she shouldn't. And some of my friends were like, oh, she's going to be the first woman president. And I said, yeah, but that's not her North Node. I'm sorry. She should go write a book. She should go be a professor. She should go revel in being a grandmother and sit and teach and write books and get a nice house and leave all this drama behind and educate people. 12th house is the house of writing, where you sit and lecture and write and be, tell people her knowledge. She's an extremely intelligent woman, but for her own good, she should not run for president. They never listen to me. So that was the interesting thing. And by the way, I did a class with Bernadette Brady, who's an excellent astrologer. I did several classes with her, and she does the ancient astrology. And she went around and the houses and what they meant in ancient times. And the 12th house was a very, very malefic house. It was the house of secret enemies and people stabbing you in the back. Well, she's got her sun, her Venus, and her Mercury there. So she should have listened to her astrologer. And here it is written out. Will she not run? I was saying, please don't run for her own good. Please do not run. And even now, sometimes to the chagrin of Democratic operatives, she still is on the stage. She's still making speeches. She's still poking Trump. And I know a lot of Democratic operatives are like, just shut up. Stop being a lightning rod. And she still has to do that. Now, as I mentioned, Al Gore also is Scorpio Taurus. He was born around the same time. The nodes stay in the same sign for 18 months. And this is what some people talk about soul groups, and that's another discussion. But this clumping of Scorpio, and then, of course, the next 18 months, you did your Sag South Noders. Nodes go backwards, so you get your Libra. So Al Gore had this. I believe Al Gore's node is in the 9th house, not the 1st house. But again, he has found some modicum, and actually not some, but a lot of kudos, because he's championing his climate change thing. He missed the presidency, terribly painful. I can't imagine going through what he did in the recounts and all that stuff. But he's the expert on global warming, and he's now saying, "See, I was right. If I was president, we wouldn't have been in this situation because I would have put this stuff through." But he has found sort of this niche, and Taurus is very earth-based, so ecology and being of the earth is very Taurian. So I would argue that he is a lot further along in getting into his North Node. And there's this is getting a little off track, but people with a Scorpio Taurus nodal axis, regardless of which is north and which is south, often have to suffer difficult, like really shocking things to boost them into that node because of Scorpio's love of drama and death and birth and dying. So sometimes people are booted into that node by a loss of a loved one or loss of money or some tragic, shocking thing. And I would say that Mr. Gore has done that. So that's what led me on this journey, if you will. So I looked at George Washington. Okay, so mostly everybody says he's our most successful president, right? He's storied president. And so I said, all right, let's take a look at old George. Now, George is in many ways the opposite of Trump. But his south node is in Gemini, where Trump's north node is Gemini. He's coming. George Washington was coming from a Gemini south node. So someone who was very good at distilling a lot of information, taking information from here and there and bringing it together, not necessarily worried about Sagittarius's, I've got to know everything I have to know about this topic. Gemini is the raconteur. Gemini is the, hey, you want to hear this? Come over here. I got this information for you. And, oh, you've got this one tidbit for me? Okay, I'm not going to study anymore. So Geminis have to sort of calm that down and go into sort of a depth of study. But he was coming from Gemini. Gemini in that second house again. Interesting. So he was very happy. And I have to tell you, I always thought those stories about George Washington being so sad, having to leave his beloved Mount Vernon to go be first president, I thought that was a little bit of hooey. I thought he was massively ambitious. He wanted it. And I said, that's just lore. That's just political hooey. But it wasn't. He really did love Mount Vernon. He really did love having those dinners, because what was that? That was an exchange of information that fed his South Node, my self-worth. I love having all these people stop over at Mount Vernon and having these very long discussions on many, many topics, because if you look up at the 10th house, that's where Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is, and his was in Aquarius. I need to gather information. Aquarians love more information and, what's going on. So he was very happy there, but he jumped. He listened. He said, this is good, but I need something else. And so he followed that Sagittarius North Node into the 8th house, the 8th house that is dominated by Pluto in Scorpio. I'm going to take a life and death risk. I'm going to expand. I'm going to leave behind being the raconteur of Mount Vernon, where I could have lived a very wealthy, Martha Washington was the richest woman in Virginia when he married her. They were loaded. And, I'm going to build this beautiful house, and I'm going to just sit here and exchange all these information. I'm going to have this country gentleman's life. But I'm going to give it up to lead this ragtag army, these 13 colonies, and I'm going to fight the greatest power, military power the world has ever known. And, life and death, 8th house. And I'm going to do this with the Sag concentration. This is what I have to learn. I have to learn how to be president. I have to learn. And he was not the smartest man in the room. George Washington was not an intelligent, in the terms of like a Hamilton or even a Jefferson, although Jefferson, I think, fudged it a bit. But he was not a naturally brilliant man. But boy, he used that Gemini to say, okay, you guys got to help me. I need your information because I have to learn how to do this. I've got to fight this war. I've got to lead this country. So my argument would be that, yes, George Washington was successful. He might have also been a very successful unknown Virginia planter his whole life if he stayed at his South Node. But he took the jump into his North, and look how much more he accomplished. So again, I kind of wrote this out here, the gracious landed plantation owner he could have been. But as I say, he heard the call of something greater. He pivoted, he jumped. There's a point in all of our lives where we have to say, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to change, I'm going to pivot. And a lot of people have this as like a moment, like a flash of insight, like this is not working. I'm going to jump. Some people, it's sort of more natural, like a flow. It's like a gained awareness. But some people have this moment of like, this is my moment. This may be great, or this is not working, or I need something more, and I'm going to jump. I'm going to leap into that North Node. And I think he leaped. So, of course, if you're looking at George, you got to look at Abe, right? Often considered always on top. Every historian lists, George Abe or Abe George, right? He's the man who held the Union together, came through the hideous, hideous Civil War. So if you're looking at great presidents, you got to look at Abe. So we actually know what time he was born. There's a little bit of controversy since he was born out in the Kentucky wilderness. But there was actually someone who wrote this down, and there was a neighbor woman who came to visit the cabin after his mother gave birth, and she recorded, it was 2 a.m. So we do believe that this is an accurate depiction of the time of birth. With Washington, it was easier. He was a man of wealth, and times of births were recorded in family Bibles. This was something that was done. But we're kind of lucky that we have this for Lincoln. So the thing that always cracks me up about Lincoln, look down at his South Node, that cup facing up. It's in the 5th house, and it's in Taurus. And I've heard my whole life, how did that country bumpkin, who basically had no education, and he went to what they called blab school, where they had 6 or 7 kids of any age, all being kind of taught the same thing at once in a one-room schoolroom. He had a father who hated knowledge, thought he was actually a wastrel. His father, and you see his Saturn in the 12th house. Saturn is often a depiction of the father. It's in that rather malefic house. His father, when he would go off and read, he was a voracious reader. His father just thought he was not doing his work. He was being a waster. And it was his second mother. His first mother died, and his stepmother, who actually saved him, who kept saying, no, leave him alone, leave him alone. There's something about this boy. He's special. And it's a kind of very interesting relationship that he had with his mother. But again, I'm digressing. So he has a Taurus South Node. And so everybody would say, how did he write the Gettysburg Address? And how did he write these? I mean, his second inaugural is one of the most brilliant pieces of American literature. He was just a bumpkin. He was a bumpkin with a Taurus South Node in the 5th house, folks. Taurus, right? The creator, right? Creativity, beauty, arts, goddess of love. In the house of creativity, right? The 5th house is where we literally shine, where we show our creative spark. So he may have been born in horrible circumstances in terms of money. He was dirt poor, had no education. But, and I often read when he writes the Mystic Chords of Memory, which is probably one of his most famous sentences. He talks about the nation's mystic chords of memory. He was writing from his mystic chords of memory. He's got his Aries South Node in this very creative house. His Venus is in Aries in the 4th house. Again, 4th is very primal, very close to me. Who am I? Who's my family? Next to Vesta, the burning heart's desire. So this is someone who had a very powerfully placed Venus South Node. And he too, like George Washington, was highly ambitious. In fact, he often was very upset as a child that he was born too late. Being born in 1809, the revolution was over. I'm never going to be anything. No, and there's many written down words and people who used to say, yeah, he used to say, no one will ever know I lived because I'm this country bumpkin and I can't get anywhere in politics because all the good stuff has happened. No one will ever record my life. This was something that bothered him. And well, why? Well, let's see. He's got his North Node in dramatic Scorpio. So he's going the exact opposite of Hillary and Al Gore. Just like, I think it's interesting too, Washington was going opposite Trump. Abe Lincoln is going opposite. He's coming from Taurus, grounded in beauty and art and literature and all these earth and these great things. But he's going to Scorpio. He's leaving, if you will, the earthly plane. Scorpio wants to be involved in big things. He's got Uranus right next to it. I need to be unique, right? I need to do something great. And here I am, born out in these Kentucky wilds, and no one's ever going to know me because I missed it. I'm born too late to be great, if you will. And so his whole journey from Taurus is, again, to get into the fight, if you will, get into mystery, get into that life and death battle, get into something, of great import. And it's interesting that it's not in the 10th house, the house of government. It's in the house of people who come together, like the 11th house. I've often remember being taught the 11th house is where you find your tribe, your like-minded people who think like you. You come together to share these, to make some great social movement in the 11th house. And the whole concept, I remember Doris Kearns Goodwin coined the term, team of rivals, that he brought all these like-minded people together, and he was able to maintain all that passion and drive and drama. And, if you read the story of Lincoln, nobody in his cabinet thought he was worth a hill of beans. Stanton, who came to be his greatest supporter, was like, I'll rule this bumpkin. He doesn't know what he's doing. I'm just going to pull the strings behind this puppet because this guy's a fool. And then, of course, he realized that this man was an absolute genius. So the argument can easily be made that Abraham Lincoln certainly jumped, certainly took the chance, and do not believe that he was content with being a bumpkin. Actually, he hated the rail splitter, right? He hated that moniker. He hated being known as the guy who spoke funny. He had a very bad, actually had a pretty bad speaking voice, but he had a very bad, Kentucky backwoods accent that people mocked, which is one of the reasons that they forced their oldest son, Robert, the only son to have a long life, to go to the best schools and to be very educated, because they were not going to have their son go through what they did as these country bumpkins. But here's a man who jumped, and you see he's got Sagittarius rising. So his Jupiter, which is down there in the third house, the house of community, right? Brothers, siblings, he's got all this third house community and family and we are brothers kind of thing. He's got the ruler of his north node there. He's got the ruler of his rising sign there. So he built this community, but he certainly rose. So the argument that Lincoln was very much in his node is an easy one, is a very easy one. And here's again what I wrote out, pretty much what I've just been saying, to have it there. He was ruled by all of these things. He wanted to get into his north node. He was beckoned by this Pluto I call the mysterious god of the underworld, to get out of that safety of Taurus, where Hillary should go into the safety of Taurus, like Al Gore has done. He's found his niche in environment. She needs to go sit and write a book at a nice place, and she'd be very much better off. And here I talk about the third house, his passion, that ability to turn enemies into friends, to build community, to make them brothers. Now, this is a sad one. James Buchanan, he's often considered perhaps the worst. Old Jimmy. The sad part is that James Buchanan wanted to be president. He ran for president, I don't know how many times. And if you look at his chart, and let's do, and you are sort of uninitiated into the nodal stuff, and you look at it first glance, you'd say, this guy's going to be perfect. His south node is in Aries, the warrior, right? The fighter, the leader. It's in the 10th house, the house of government. And look, Mars is right there. Mars, the ruler of his south nodes, on his south node in the 10th house. Next to it is Saturn, the authoritarian. Holy cow, is this guy made to be president? But you have to say, wait a minute. That's his south node. That's what he's done. And here's a little trick. If you've got the ruler of the south node on the south node, and by that I mean there's Aries, right, in the 10th house, Aries south node. Mars is the ruler of Aries, and Mars is right next. It's 2 degrees away. It's sitting right on there. When you have the ruler of the south on the south, it indicates somebody who is stuck, because all the energy is concentrated on that south node. So here's a guy with a very, very strong karmic memory, karmic identity of, hey guys, I'm Aries south node in the 10th house. I'm a great ruler. I'm Mars. I can do this. Right? So he wants to be president. I mean, he ran in the 1840s. He ran later in the 1850s. He wanted to be president. He was dying. He was trying to claw his way back subconsciously to this memory of being this leader. And it was all his south node. Like, no, stop, go back. Because if you look at his north node, the opposite sign of Aries is Libra. And the opposite house of 10th, which is government and career and lifestyle, is the 4th, which is my home, my roots, me. Libra, of course, doesn't want to fight, right? So what is Aries? This is a men are from Mars and women are from Venus thing, right? Aries is the stereotypical Western idea of masculine energy, right? I lead, you follow. It's all about me. I'm front and center. I'm the warrior, you name it. So somebody really stuck in Aries can be the road rage guy, can be the obnoxious guy. This is like, I am leader. I am warrior, Where Libra, right, is ruled by Venus, the goddess of love. She was Aphrodite to the Greeks, right? She's not about me. Libra is all about the other person. Let me take in your feelings. Let's go do something creative. Let's collaborate. Buchanan, interestingly enough, was considered to be gay. There are many, almost all historians now, pretty much say that he was gay. He allegedly had a girlfriend who died, and the story was that this shattered him so that he simply could not ever be with another woman. No one's ever actually found any historical evidence that this woman existed. And we do know that he lived with a man in the White House, and there were many, many, obnoxious jokes about Mr. and Mrs. And so he probably was gay. So when we're talking about the men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and this male and female dichotomy, it's kind of sad. If he had been president at a genteel time, perhaps if he had been president after the Civil War, like when Grant was, when there was peace, there was prosperity, the arts were going, you had Mark Twain writing, he probably wouldn't have been bad. But he was not the president for such a difficult time because he was stuck. He had the karmic memory of, oh yeah, war. But with the Libra pulling him, he couldn't do it. He couldn't go back. They said he was just sort of flapping around as the states divided. And as this got worse and worse and worse, so that when Lincoln came in, it was, everything was shattered. And, if Buchanan had been a better president, we might not even have heard of Abraham Lincoln. Because maybe there would have been no war, or it would have been a different resolution. So he just sort of flapped around for 4 years as the country crumbled. And that's what led to the great thing. So that's why he's often considered our absolute worst president. But if he had been like president during a genteel time, if he had been someone who could lead with the arts, look, he's got his Neptune there, arts and creativity. And his niece was his first lady. Actually, she was very, very good first lady. She did many, many things. Harriet Lane was her name. Her picture's still in the White House, in the green room, I believe. So she did do a lot of entertaining, and that's what he loved to do, because that was Libra pulling on him. It was like Mars was telling him you have to be president, but Libra was saying, no, you really want to be first lady. So he was stuck in these things. So poor James Buchanan, he was a man stuck between many things. He could have been a great cultural leader. That is the tragedy and the irony. And here's the talk about his niece Harriet Lane and what could have been. Now, I was going to pick another president. For a while, I had Andrew Johnson, who was often considered maybe the second or third worst president. Lincoln was sandwiched between these two. But I went with Jimmy Carter, because Jimmy Carter, I was in college when Carter, at the end of my college years, and he, by many accounts, he was not a great president, right? We had a lot of issues. Remember, he sat with his sweater during the energy crisis, telling people to lower their thermostats, and he was ridiculed. This is not the American way. And he had the Iran hostage crisis, and he had a troubled presidency. But Jimmy Carter, who is now, 90, he was born in 24. My math is not that great, but he's 94, 95, 96. He is considered, because he's had 50 years of being an ex-president, as one of our greatest ex-presidents. And here's a man who, he's He's done great things for international health. He's gotten rid of this horrible worm that used to kill millions of people. He's stands up for human rights and fair elections. I mean, he's really a phenomenal ex-president. So I said, let me look at old Jimmy. He comes from an Aquarius South Node. Again, fourth house. You see, these guys are 4, 10, 4, 10, 2, 8. It's very interesting. It's something else I need to look at is this presidential dichotomy of where the houses are. So Aquarius next to Vesta, next to Mars. So there's a lot of drive there with Vesta, the burning heart's desire. Of course, it's retrograded, but Mars, the warrior. But Aquarius is very future thinking, very compassionate, very, we are all brothers. But Aquarius doesn't like to be, it's like, I love the world. I love all mankind. I just really am not too crazy about my neighbor. Aquarians are not touchy-feely. So he couldn't get up there and say, look, we got this really bad energy crisis. We got to do something about it. He kind of sat back with his little sweater on with the fireplace and whatever room he was in the White House. And it was kind of pathetic. But remember, Aquarius, compassionate, future thinking, always on the go, always trying to make the world a better place. So he's got a lot of good qualities from there. But are they qualities to be president? Well, again, if you look and you're someone who doesn't really study charts and you kind of just take a fast look, you're like, well, sure he is, because his North Node is in the 10th house. And you just said Buchanan's nodes were screwed up. And maybe if his North Node was in the 10th house and not a South Node, he would have been a better president. So Jimmy should be a better president. Okay, he's got a North Node in Leo in the 10th. So, hey, Leo's the lion. Leo is the king to the jungle. So Leo should be a great president. What are you talking about? You're cracked. You're wrong. This is all wrong. Look what's sitting next to it. Neptune. Venus, right? Neptune is our connection to God, to the source, to the universe, whatever you want to call it. And Jimmy Carter, we talked about the Republicans being evangelical, and now they are. But Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, was the first president to talk about his religion. He ushered in the evangelical movement that Reagan took advantage of, and the Republicans sort of siphoned off. But it was Jimmy Carter who talked about his connection to God. You remember, I was around when Kennedy was president. He had to stand up and say, look, I may be Catholic, but the Pope is not going to run this country, because people were so terrified in 1960 of having someone's religion interfere. And then Carter comes along in 76, 77, and he's out there talking about his experience with God and his evangelical religion. So he's got Neptune, sort of this very fuzzy, again, very compassionate, but very religious in a way. Neptune connects us to source. And next to it is Venus, the goddess of love and creativity and beauty and all those things I've said. So he makes a much better, compassionate, almost religious leader than he does president. Because one, he's coming from Aquarius, which Aquarians don't want to be center stage. Aquarians, I need to hide. So Aquarians don't have that natural drive that you need to like be obnoxious and put yourself out there the way politicians do. So he's got that memory too strong. And he's got this, yes, I want to be on stage. I want to be a world leader, Leo, 10th house, but I want to be like a religious leader. I want to be a leader of love and compassion and beauty and, duckies quacking. And I'm not making fun of that. I think Jimmy Carter has done more, than almost anyone in their whole life to be compassionate, to be caring. But he should have been, he should have been either a minister or he should have been a humanitarian leader. He didn't have to be president. He didn't have what it takes to stand up and say, hey guys, this is not it. His sun is tucked away in the 12th house. Again, this is not a place for center stage. The 12th house is very hidden, very secret. And again, that 12th house, the house of enemies, and people ridiculed him. And remember, a lot of the Republicans were trying to say Obama, oh, he's just another Jimmy Carter. He doesn't have the guts and the gumption. So he was still being used as a weapon. He's got, his moon, although it's in Scorpio, but it's in the 1st house. So he wears his emotions on his sleeve. This is a leader, but not a political leader, and certainly not a political leader of a country that is got cutthroat politics. And most countries do, but you know what I mean. And so he should have followed some path to be a leader, just not president. Don't you wish they would teach kids in their grammar schools about their north nodes? It was like all this education in terms of training. It would be a lot better, and say, oh, now your north node, you should go here, you should go there. So as I say, with that dreamy, compassionate Neptune and that creative feminine Venus. So this is why it's essential not to make snap decisions, not to say, oh, your north node's and blah, blah, blah. Therefore, you've got to look at the aspects, and I'm doing a fast around each of these charts, but you've got to really study, examine that axis, nodal axis, look at the planets in aspect, ask yourself, what's the addiction? What were they addicted to? What was their issue, right? With Trump, I'm addicted to, I know, my knowledge is supreme because I'm a Sag. Remember, Sag is the sign of fundamentalism. And when we did the Pluto, when we went around, and I think it was my second Zoom, we did Pluto. When Pluto was in Sagittarius, it was when we had 9/11, when we had the rise of fundamentalism. I know, and that's it. And then look at, where that energy is coming from. Yeah, with George Washington, it was Gemini. He would have been very happy, So just study every aspect. Go within before you go out there and really get a sense. Because again, you could say, oh, look at James Buchanan. Wow, 10th house. Jimmy Carter. Wow, 10th house. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Mm-mm. Even though Carter was going to a 10th house and was a great leader, not in politics. And Buchanan should have let it go. So again, that's just a sample, but play with these. Look at famous people and the roles that they did. It's kind of fun. I mean, if you like history like I do, it's kind of fun to see where they are and how they're evolving. It's sort of like the drama. Will Hillary ever get into her north node? Who knows what will happen to Trump? I personally, and I don't like to say this because, again, if I'm working with a client, I'm not going to say to them, you're never going to get in your north node. That's ridiculous. But I can't imagine anything that would move Trump off of his at least outward bluster of I was right all along and I know. No matter what happens to him, it's always going to be he knows, at least in public. But it's interesting. And then you look at somebody like Al Gore, who, I'm not mitigating the pain he felt, and it must be horrible to be this close to something and lose it that way. But in some ways, I think he might be happier. He found his Taurus. When you find that North Node niche, everything sort of works for you. So again, play with it. Look at famous people. Look at their professions. If it's something that interests you, like it interests me, it'll keep you up at night. So thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. And if anybody, I think we have a couple minutes. If anybody has any questions, if not, you know how to get in touch with me if you think of any.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, looks like that's it. Thank you so much. Would you all please thank Joan Porte, everyone?
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Joan.
Thank you.
That's fascinating. Bye. Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.